This is a most directly.
So this is our very own dearly or not so dearly departed former President Jim Carter discussing the situation in Palestine. So yeah, he died today. You have all these frenemies. I'm going to call the poo poo man. All right. I strongly advise you to seek medical treatment. Anyways, so yeah, Jimmy Carter died today. Really, not all that unexpected. I mean, the guy was 100 fucking years old. He is the longest lived ex president in American history. Why the fuck is my voice so deep? Because I am a 30-year-old black man?
Uh, Affecting adversely America in not bringing peace to Israel and justice. And
This guy was born in 1924. 1924. There were literally still American Civil War veterans that did not have dementia walking around when this guy, like, the possibility of Jimmy Carter having met a Civil War veteran is very high.
peace to the Palestinians, yes.
I mean, you obviously were very successful in bringing peace with Israel and Egypt. Can any
No, he wasn't.
deal be done that doesn't involve sitting across a table with Hamas?
I've met several times with Hamas leadership, and I think that
Jimmy Carter is Hamas.
they are willing to accept Israel to exist peacefully within the 67 borders or some modification of those borders.
That's news to me.
But the first step has to be to bring Hamas and Fatah together so they can have another honest election. That is a major premise, and I
Y'all just got to get together and vote. I mean, that's what we do in the United States. I don't know what y'all fighting and carrying on for.
think the 67 borders between the two, with some modifications, will lead to it.
I mean, y'all got to respect the border. What y'all fighting carrying on for? And y'all flying parachutes over into Israel? Come on. That ain't gonna work.
Two-state solution.
My grandpappy was in the Civil War on the losing side, mind you. But come on, war don't never solve nothing.
You know, Netanyahu now, I believe, has decided unequivocally to move to a one-state solution, which every one of his predecessors in the prime ministership have condemned as a disaster for Israel. And I think Israel is now moving toward a disaster for itself and insisting that all the way from the
Y'all can't do that. Y'all can't just kick the Palestinians off their land and fix it so they ain't got nowhere to lay their heads. Of course you're gonna make a disaster for yourself.
Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea has to be Israeli controlled. That is a mistake. The word apartheid is exactly accurate.
So yeah, like people have been arguing over his legacy. Yes, Jimmy Carter in office was a fuck. Every American president in office has been an absolute useless fuck. That is undeniable. But at the same time, I think he was really afraid of going to Baptist hell. Like this is the one Christian president that we've had that was actually afraid of going to hell. So he realized that, you know what, maybe I should leave a legacy for the world that ain't fucked up. Like I ain't trying to be Nixon. Like even the presidents who have done objectively good shit, like LBJ, he helped get the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts passed, but he also carried out an imperialist war of aggression in Vietnam, or Vietnam, as he would call it. And like FDR, okay, he muddled into World War II, but he also incarcerated every single Japanese person within the borders of the United States and did a variety of really bad things. He was also anti-Semitic as fuck.
You know, this is an area
And yes, Yiddish is better than Hebrew.
that's occupied by two powers. They're now completely separated. The Palestinians can't even ride on the same roads that the Israelis have created or built in Palestinian territory. The Israelis never see a Palestinian except their Israeli soldiers. The Palestinians never see an Israeli except at a distance, except the Israeli soldiers. So within Palestinian territory, they're absolutely and totally separate.
If he could walk, this guy would have been showing up at all of the protests after October 7th. Were there any in Plains, Georgia? I don't think so. But if there were, I believe that he would have somebody pushing his wheelchair at the protests.
Much worse than they were in South Africa, by the way. And the other thing is, the other definition of apartheid is one side dominates the other, and the Israelis completely dominate.
Y'all need to read Settlers. That Japanese fellow, Jay Sakai, he really he was right on the money. Y'all need to read Settlers, and y'all need to stop being such trait lies.
The life of the Palestinian people.
Why don't Americans know what you have seen?
Because Americans are fucking idiots. I love my people. Like, I do not hate the American people. Like, Paul Robeson did a song, The House That I Live In. And it was basically like an idea of what America could be, or what America was to him. Like the community, the food, the struggles, the working class solidarity. But like I do not despise the American people at all, because I'm one of them. But at the same time, like, we are capable of some immensely idiotic, either willful or unwillful dissonance.
Americans don't want to know, and many Israelis don't want to know what is going on inside Palestine.
Yeah, like the American response to horrible shit going on, it's either to cover our ears and our eyes and, I don't know, put on sports, or try to justify it, make up an excuse for why it's happening, or like just like the Germans under Nazi Germany, like they went along with the shit because it provided them material benefits that came at the expense of millions upon millions of dead people. And even the thing with fascism is, like, you support it because of the material benefits that it supposedly provides. Like, oh yeah, you got your Jewish neighbor's business or whatever, or you took over your Jewish neighbor's house. But that shit eventually comes to bite you in the ass, because eventually people are going to get together and they're going to fuck you up, and you're not going to have a good time. So you're going to lose all. Like, Germany was bombed into fucking ruins as a result of its many, many, many crimes during the Nazi era. And you basically had Jahr Null, year zero. You had to start all over again because of the stupid actions that you did nothing to prevent.
It's a terrible human rights persecution that far transcends what any outsider would imagine.
So yeah, he died today. Let's see what the Rolling Stone has to say. U.S. President and prolific humanitarian dead at 100. Jimmy Carter, humanitarian, diplomat, and 39th President of the United States, died Sunday at his home in Plains, Georgia, after receiving hospice care. His son, James E. Chip Carter III, confirmed he was 100. Chip said, "My father was a hero, not only to me, but to everyone who believes in peace, human rights, and unselfish love. My brother, sister, and I shared him with the rest of the world through these common beliefs. The world is our family because of the way he brought people together, and we thank you for honoring his memory by continuing to live these shared beliefs." So he started his political career in the Georgia state legislature, then he became governor of Georgia, and then he took the 1976 Democratic primary, and then he beat Gerald Ford to be the 39th president of the United States. So why did Americans vote for him? Because, like, people got tired of, like, assholes like Nixon and, like, Midwestern boors like Gerald Ford. So yeah, let's give a Southerner a chance. Let's give a guy who grew up on a fucking peanut farm a chance. And, like, he had never been in Washington before. He hadn't been a congressman. He hadn't been a senator. He hadn't been anything. He was just like some dude. He had executive experience. Obviously, he had been a governor of a whole ass state. But, like, people like outsiders. People like people who are not tied into the bureaucratic pollywonk bullshit. That's what I keep trying to tell people in DSA. Like, you all keep kissing AOC and all these other weirdos' ass. Like, why don't we run actual proletarian candidates? Like, I read this book. It's by Aaron Dixon, who I'm going to be interviewing on New Year's Eve, Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about, like, the we're going to be talking about what's going on over in Rojava, because after the fall of the Assad government, you had the Turks and their proxies that have been moving in and uh, making quite a mess of things. So, um, anyways, um, so we're going to be talking about like proletarian internationalism and what it was like in the Panther era and what it should be like today. And more importantly, I'm going to fanboy a bit, and I'm going to be talking about like his experience with the Black Panther Party and like what is his advice for what's going on today. But anyways, back to the book. The book is called My People Are Rising by Aaron Dixon, and you should read it. So in the book, he talks about like how the Black Panther Party was able to transform itself basically into a political machine and dominate a lot of the politics of Oakland in the 70s and early 80s. They helped to get the first black mayor of Oakland elected, Lionel Wilson, who did not know a lot about politics, but the Black Panther Party literally ran his candidacy. And their political machine was essentially getting black judges appointed. The Port of Oakland, there were two Panthers that were on the Port of Oakland board, and there was a variety of other revolutionary changes that were made to Oakland politics. So I don't have the like hard Maoist electoral abstentionist stance that I used to because I read about stuff like that. And I think at the local level, shit like that can happen. Like DSA can learn from stuff like that. Quit running or tailing behind the progressive pollywonks that say the most progressive shit and then just get in office and fuck you over. You have to actually have control of things. Otherwise, you're really not doing all that much. So back to Jimmy Carter. Carter would only serve one term. Despite several landmark foreign policy achievements, his time in office was characterized by struggles to manage an energy crisis, an unstable economy, and the Iran hostage crisis, which spanned 444 days of his presidency. To many Americans, Carter never seemed the natural fit for the White House, turning his back on many of the trappings of the office. He famously banned the playing of Hail to the Chief and failed to project a resolute image in the face of a series of national maladies. So, a bit about his background, like, yeah, he was extremely indecisive. His Secret Service detail also hated him because apparently he was a micromanaging asshole. Like Jimmy Carter seemed to have been fit more to be like a bureaucrat or something like that, as opposed to being an executive. Like he sucked at it. Um, so yeah, he was a nerd. I think he was on a nuclear submarine. No, he was a submariner during the immediate aftermath of World War II. So scientific background, math, STEM type dude. Really intelligent, but just a shitty politician. So he was born October 1st, 1924 in Plains, Georgia. He was raised in a family of peanut farmers. He attended Georgia Southwestern State, Georgia Tech, and the United States Naval Academy. Big STEM nerd. He worked on a new nuclear submarine, and then he took over his father's peanut farming business. He established himself as a progressive local leader. He resisted pressure to join the local White Citizens Council and won a state in the Georgia State Senate in 1962. He became governor after running for the second time in 1970. Hillbilly Mao Zedong says that he is an outsider. DSA should put all their support behind this banjo-picking redneck. Eh, I'd back you. Why not? So, his relentless campaigning and honest man of the people message landed him the 1976 Democratic presidential nomination. Another lesson for DSA. People like people who talk like them. People like people who act like them. People like people who do the things that they do. He was also known as the rock and roll president. He had really good relationships with Willie Nelson, who is somehow still alive, Greg Allman, and Bob Dylan, who also is somehow still alive. I'm really, really surprised that Bob Dylan is still stealing air. But he hated playing politics, like most people do. He didn't get along with Congress, and a few of his supposed W's in office were normalizing relations with China. Nixon and Kissinger opened the door for that. Brokering peace between Israel and Egypt through the Camp David Accords, and ratifying the Panama Canal treaties, which turned control over the waterway over to its namesake nation and ensured its neutrality, which Trump is trying to undo. These were foreign policy accomplishments, but he was not all that good in inspiring hope domestically. People that I've talked to who went through the Carter administration, like they basically say, yeah, shit sucked. You had a shitty economy. You had all types of shit going on. he did give a damn good speech during the whole. If you've watched The Miracle, like that, for some reason, that was every white middle-aged uh, high school teacher's favorite thing to show when they didn't want to do shit that day. And like he gave a really really good speech during the whole Miracle on Ice period. But anyways, um, yeah. But again, people who are from South Korea and various other places that suffered in U.S. imperial, like do literally supported the Khmer Rouge. Oh, that's a fetching picture. He also had a major L when he failed to secure. You know what? The Iranians actually fucked them on this. Like they did this on purpose because they released the hostages that were taken in Iran, like literally minutes after Reagan was sworn in office to fuck Jimmy Carter up because Carter let the shine. Yeah. After warding off a primary challenge from Ted Kennedy, Carter lost all but 6 states in the District of Columbia to Ronald Reagan, who ran on the campaign slogan, "Let's make America great again." All 52 hostages were freed minutes after Reagan took the oath of office. The Khmer Rouge has lost their last prominent member. Rest in power. He also advised Trump. At 93 years old, he offered to serve as an envoy to North Korea as tensions escalated between Trump and Kim Jong-un. I really don't see, like what did they expect the North Koreans to do? Like kidnap a 93-year-old man? Hey, you can't hold me hostage. I won through the Iranian hostage trial. You can't hold me hostage. Unlike other presidents, Carter did not parlay his post-presidential fame into monetary gain. He also bought his clothes at Dollar General, which I find like hilarious. But you also have, of course, crimes that Jimmy Carter either aided and abetted or ignored. So, let's see the crimes of Jimmy Carter. Stop fucking messaging me. In 1980, 44 years ago, Jimmy Carter approved an operation to crush a pro-democracy uprising in Gwangju, South Korea, against a U.S.-backed military dictatorship. South Korean military forces killed at least 600 people and injured over 4,000. U.S.-backed dictator Chun Doo-hwan sent Korean special forces to Gwangju and instituted martial law across the country. Universities were shut down and political speech barred as protests began breaking out across the country. The crackdown was carried out by South Korean special forces trained for missions inside North Korea. They beat people with clubs, stabbed and mutilated them with bayonets, threw at least 20 off of buildings, and used U.S.-supplied weapons, Jimmy Carter-supplied weapons, which killed protesters. One witness described the soldiers' brutality. A cluster of troops attacked each student individually. They would crack his head, stomp his back, and kick him in the face. When the soldiers were done, he looked like a pile of clothes in meat sauce. The brutality caused the Gwangju protests to swell and also take up arms and liberate the city in the style of the Paris Commune. Based. Daily citizens' assemblies were created, and much of the entire city joined the protesters, creating a self-governing community. By May 19th, the army sent 3,000 more soldiers, which began shooting into the crowds. Troops killed 20 girls at Gwangju Central High School. Ambulance and cab drivers who tried to take the wounded to hospitals were also fired on. This is some goon squad shit. So that's one of them. He also backed this evil motherfucker with this ugly ass hat. Actually, the hat is kind of based. I wouldn't wear it. And this suit that he made, it's called an abacost. It literally means down with the suit. I don't know if he was trying to go for a Mao look here, but yeah. He was basically like a weird crypto cultural nationalist. This is Mobutu Seke Seko, the dictator of the DRC, the Congo, that took over after Patrice Lumumba was murdered. And yeah, U.S.-backed dictator. He changed the name of the Congo in 1971 to Zaire. In early 1977, rebels fighting with the revolutionary MPLA in Angola re-entered Zaire to resume the civil war and oust the military strongman. Mobutu sought help from his American and European allies to crush the movement. Carter was reluctant to involve his administration in this intervention, whose scope and length could not be easily anticipated. However, Carter did provide non-lethal aid, which he did not protest as European countries offered military aid, and Morocco sent several thousand of its U.S.-trained military forces to aid Mobutu. So Carter's like sterling record, in big air quotes, is basically like you sneaky. Like, no, he knew, he had common sense enough to know that if you sent literal military aid to these people, that there was going to be far reaching ramifications, including at his, in the United States. So he did not do that. But what he did do was allow Morocco, because look, if you're a U.S. client state and the U.S. tells you to do something, you do it. So when people talk about like, oh, the U.S. can't stop the genocide in Gaza, the U.S. doesn't have anything to do with this. The U.S. Yes, the fuck we do. We can literally turn the tap off and stop all of the shit. They cannot shoot if they don't have any bullets. So what a lot of people do, what a lot of people in politics and our government do to be sneaky is they backdoor shit. They give it through proxies. They'll, I'll send you a first aid kit, or I'll give you non-lethal assistance. But lethal could become lethal really fast. It's like cops talking about non-lethal weaponry. Okay, if you hand me a flashlight, yeah, that's technically non-lethal. But if it's heavy enough, I can stove your skull in with it. That's what non-lethal American assistance means. Carter asserted on more than one occasion that the Zaire crisis was an African problem, best solved by Africans. Oh, the anti-imperialism of fools. Yet he apparently saw no contradiction to this thesis in his own policy, nor did he offer any criticism of France or Belgium, which sent Mobutu a substantial amount of military equipment. Belgium, of course, has been meddling in the Congo for a century and a half. In Guatemala, Carter administration issued a report critical of the human rights record of the military regime and officially cut off aid. However, William Bloom argues that this was little more than a public relations stunt with tangible support continued. The embargoes were never meant to be more than partial, and Guatemala also received weapons and military equipment from Israel, again, backdoored from Washington. If Washington, D.C. doesn't want to get its hands dirty, then they'll just summon Israel, because Israel doesn't give a shit about getting its hands dirty, as we've seen over the past several decades in Palestine. So if you need some dirty work done, involve the Israelis, at least part of which was covertly underwritten by Washington. As further camouflage, some of the training of Guatemala's security forces was repeatedly maintained by transferring it to clandestine states in Pinochet's Chile and Argentina, which was under the government of some military dictators. Meanwhile, the horrors of a genocidal campaign against the indigenous population continued unabated on Carter's watch in Guatemala. Death squads were eliminating peasants, labor leaders, human rights activists, and clergy. In the countryside, the military would torture and burn alive subversives, such as Nobel Prize winner Rigoberta Menchu's own brother. Again, this sterling humanitarian said absolutely nothing about it. After the democratically elected President Sukarno of Indonesia was overthrown with the assistance of the CIA in 1967, Suharto assumed power as military dictator and a strong ally of the U.S. government. In late 1975, Kissinger and Ford gave the green light to Suharto to invade neighboring East Timor. After occupying the capital city of Dili, Indonesian troops systematically rooted out oppressions of resistance by the Revolutionary Front for an Independent East Timor, Fretilin, and the civilian population across the island. Residents of occupied areas were submitted to massive re-education campaigns. Not the fun communist re-education campaigns, but if you do not agree with what we tell you, we will literally execute you. That's Suharto's type of political re-education. There is no room for struggle. There is no room for debate. You either accept what we do or we kill you. The death toll from violence by Indonesian forces, malnutrition, and disease quickly climbed into the tens of thousands. The killing reached its peak in 1977. On March 1st, 95 members of the Australian Parliament sent a letter to Carter claiming that the Indonesian troops were carrying out atrocities and asking the American president to comment publicly on a situation in East Timor. The response was crickets. Carter ramped up aid with funding and weapons to the Indonesian regime, brazenly flaunting the human rights requirements imposed on American aid. So yeah, you can talk about like his foreign policy W's, which were few and far between, but ultimately he did what any other U.S. president does, which is back horrible, shitty apartheid regimes. And I honestly think that Jimmy Carter had some semblance of a conscience. Okay, like I don't think that he was a fucking Trump or a Nixon or a George W. Bush. Okay, but at the same time, when you're summing up somebody's legacy, you have to take the bad with the good. So overwhelmingly, this man, he was a fuck. Like his net impact on the world has been fuckery. He has blood on his shoes. He has blood on his hands. He has blood in his head. It doesn't matter how many houses he built for Habitat for Humanity. Let's see what the... Oh yeah, there is also, I clicked on this on accident, but there's an election crisis in Mozambique. So you have the ruling party, Frelimo, an old national liberation group. And there have been protests and struggles in Mozambique because, again, what happens in a lot of these countries that have had victorious national liberation struggles, what happens is the ruling party, whether it be Frelimo or the ANC, they end up a lot of corruption ends up going on, and the people are unsatisfied. After you take over a country, you have to rule. So a lot of these people are, I would say, shit at ruling, but they fall into the same trap that a lot of people fall into. Like this shit is dope. I'm going to fill my pockets. I'm going to line my pockets. I'm going to be crooked. And the people don't like that because the people are especially hard on revolutionary parties like Frelimo because they have been told that we're going to improve your life. These people, some of the elders remember what Samara Machel told them. Like, we are going to improve your life. We are going to send your kids to school. We are going to give you doctors. We are going to build you houses. None of such has happened. So, of course, the people are going to be upset. Of course, the people are going to take to the streets because the Revolutionary Party has broken the promises that it made to the people. The Constitutional Council of Mozambique has confirmed the election victory of the Frelimo Party, leading to widespread protests and violence with an estimated death toll rising to 261 people. Political opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has declared himself this is the rightful president, escalating tensions. Amid this turmoil, South Africa has sent Professor Sidney Mufamadi as a special envoy to engage with Mozambican leaders, while the South African government intensifies border security measures to manage the fallout and potential migration issues. What a lot of people understand about South Africa is that, like, South Africa is basically the United States of Africa with reverse demographics. Like, there is a huge movement in South Africa to restrict immigration. And it's really, really sad that Pan-Africanism in Africa really, it has not, it's fallen out of the consciousness of the masses. Like, a lot of these people, yeah, Samar Machel was killed via conspiracy. He made a deal with the Boers. Never make a deal with the Boers. So what happens when you, where the fuck was I? Yeah, never make a deal with the Boers. But what happens with all of these neoliberal independent countries? What happens is, like, the people eventually start looking at themselves as South Africans, as Tanzanians, as Botswanans, as Angolans, as Namibians, instead of as Africans. So, especially when the economy is shitty, people are going to be like, you know what, I don't give a fuck what happens to these Nigerians, okay? I don't want them in my country. We have enough problems. Like, South Africa can barely keep its electricity grid going for a variety of reasons. But again, that's what happens with when the revolutionaries betray the people. So let's see. Oh, look at this old man. Statement by President Joe Biden, First Lady Jill Biden on the passing of former President Jimmy Carter. Today, America and the world lost an extraordinary leader, statesman, and humanitarian. Over 6 decades, we had the honor of calling Jimmy Carter a dear friend. But what's extraordinary about Jimmy Carter, though, is that millions of people throughout America and the world who never met him thought of him as a dear friend as well. I never thought of Jimmy Carter as my friend. My mom grew up with Jimmy Carter. And she sure as fuck didn't see Reagan as a friend. My mom didn't even think, like, people don't think about Jimmy fucking Carter. He lives in an entirely different universe. With his compassion and moral clarity, what I just read doesn't necessarily scream moral clarity to me, but I digress. He worked to eradicate disease. Did he work to eradicate America? America's the number one disease eating at the guts of our planet. Forge peace, advance civil rights and human rights, unlike Biden, who refused to send his kids to school in a racial jungle, promote free and fair elections, house the homeless. He did build a shitload of houses, and always advocate for the least among us. He saved, lifted, and changed the lives of people all across the globe. He was a man of great character and courage, hope and optimism. We will always cherish seeing him and Rosalind together. The love shared between Jimmy and Rosalind Carter is the definition of partnership, and their humble leadership is the definition of patriotism. We will miss them both dearly, but take solace knowing that they are reunited once again and will remain forever in our hearts. To the entire Carter family, we send our gratitude for sharing them with America and the world. Blah, 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 blah. All of these statements like read the same. I wonder if Trump said anything. Hey, look, there's a somewhat handsome Joe Biden. Best wishes to my friend Joe Biden, Jimmy Carter. He loved his cardigans. He loved his sweaters. Barack Obama says, President Carter taught all of us what it means to live a life of grace, dignity, service, and justice. Michelle and I send our thoughts and prayers to the Carter family and everyone who loved and learned from this remarkable man. The Carter Center. It's a huge relief to know that President Biden will be able to give Jimmy Carter the state funeral. Biden's last act in office is going to be to preside over a fucking funeral. Oof. Let's see if Trump has said anything. They're going to call you the spicy almonds dictator. Okay. Trump has said nothing. Trump has said nothing. Let's see. Donald Trump. Jimmy Carter. Biden takes jab at Trump. Wow, blah, blah, blah. Oh. Joe Biden and Donald Trump have led tributes from U.S. president, blah, blah, blah. So Biden has ordered all flags, no, at half-staff. Trump posted on Truth Social, the challenges Jimmy faced as president came at a pivotal time for our country. He did everything in his power to improve the lives of all Americans. For all that, we owe him a debt of gratitude. You know, Trump writes like a fucking German. For one, he capitalizes letters in words in the middle of a sentence. He capitalizes all of his nouns. And like, it's just short and brief. Trump previously mocked Carter's single term on the campaign trail ahead of his victory in that year's presidential election and said in 2019, he's a nice man. He was a terrible president. This came after Carter called Trump an illegitimate president, claiming he was helped to the White House by Russian interference in 2016. World leaders also paid tribute to Carter. King Charles III said that his dedication and humility served as an inspiration to many, and remember with great fondness his visit to the United Kingdom in 1977. US UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said Carter was motivated by the strong faith and values which Keir Starmer does not have, and that he redefined the post-presidency with the remarkable commitment to social justice and human rights at home and abroad. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, "More Marties." French President Emmanuel Macron said, "Oh, baguette, Jimmy Carter is dead, but I leave." Okay. So, what's my take on Jimmy Carter dying? Yeah, as president, he was a fuck, but I honestly think that he tried to mitigate the effects, even if it was for nefarious reasons. Like, yeah, he wanted to whitewash his legacy and be like, I don't want people to think I'm the guy that helped out that dictator in Zaire. I want people to remember me as the jolly old man that helped build houses. And also that I was real nice to the color. I mean, yeah, Jimmy Carter was racist. Okay, he was a white dude that was born in Plains, Georgia in 1924. Okay, he was not a John Brown. But in terms of like, yeah, he would probably look at a lynching and be like, well, that's just absolutely horrible. You can't hang nobody from a tree just because they color. But would he stop it? Absolutely not. And also, the Israelis hate him. So I guess that's a W in this book. But let this be a reminder to you that these people have PR teams, okay? And there has been no entirely good president of the United States. There have been presidents of the United States that have done very good things. But ultimately, their role as the chief executive of the number one imperialist country on the face of the earth, the enemy of all of progressive humanity, he did desegregate Georgia. But back to my point, you cannot be a 100% progressive leader of the most evil country on earth. I'm sorry. If you find yourself in the Oval Office one day, you will find yourself being forced to do very, very bad things. because your number one job as president of the United States is to preserve, protect, and defend the interests of the interests of the United States and uphold the Constitution written by slaveholders. So to preserve, protect, and defend the interests of the United States, you have to preserve, protect, and defend the interests of American imperialism. So regardless of, even if you never declare a single war, even if you never send a soldier into another country, you are still doing some fucked up shit. Why? Because it's the nature of the beast. It's really that simple. I tell you guys that you could all be president someday, but there's only room for one, and I really don't want it to be either one of y'all. I don't want you all to go down in infamy. I want you all to do good things with your lives. Go to school, become a doctor. And to his credit, Jimmy Carter at least tried to get Americans to consume less. Put on a damn sweater and not crank up the heat. The Roman emperor advocates a peaceful subjugation. Vibe with the tribes. If I ever run for office, that's going to be my slogan. Vibe with the tribes. Peace. Also, back the 49ers. I was not paid to say that. Also, New Year's Eve, Tuesday, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Aaron Dixon and Comrade Dominic from Chicago, Seattle. Be here or be queer.